What's up, guys? It is March 25th, 2018. It's Q&A time, and today just did an open Q&A, Instagram and Facebook, so kind of split the questions between them. I actually had somebody complain to me last week that they weren't getting in on the questions, so if you're somebody that asks a lot of questions and I typically answer you every week, then I'm going to try to get some new people that don't really get answered so much and make it fair. And we have some company today too. Well, we did have company. She's passed out now. But anyhow, without further ado, let's go ahead and check out Instagram first. Okay. Lion's Mane, your thoughts on it, your experience, recommended dosage, etc. I do use it. I've used it for a while. I used to use it a long time ago. Let's say a long time ago. I used to use it before. It's become more popular and readily available again. There's a lot more products to choose from, better products and stuff. So we talked about it on a recent podcast, OPD podcast with Shelby Starnes, because I know he likes it as well. A couple main things with it. You want to look for a good extract, just like any herb. It's important to use something that has the fruiting bodies. Should say that on the label. That's going to be part of the extract. That's what you want to use. Dosage is going to be about 1,000 milligrams. Could be used 1 to 3 times a day, really. As far as what I noticed from it, I noticed that it does help me focus. It's not stimulating. Excuse me. It's not, and I wouldn't say it's sedating either. It's just more so helps me focus, channel what energy I already have on something productive or on one thing at a time. So I do think that that's very beneficial. If you actually think examine.com actually has a reference on it now. I think it's on their site also, and you can go check that out. They have, I believe that it's also has studies on anxiety and depression and things like that. So just a general mood stabilization would be a good way to describe it, honestly. Okay. Okay, yeah, so that's not a question. All right. Another one. Lyle has posted, so Lyle McDonald, I'm assuming, has posted quite a bit recently on the literature showing volume can reduce to 1/3 of previous, and when maintaining tension intensity, muscle mass is completely maintained. As you probably know, he uses it for people in fat loss phases. Dr. Scott has posted in the same research and used it for basis of deloading and fortitude training, and John M. uses it in his programs as a taper. Do you ever use it in a basis? Use this basis during prep as their strength begins to tail off, or do you use these tapers between training blocks to reset the CNS, etc.? So I do something similar, and I think this was just instinctual. I don't know if the actual literature was there when I started doing it. What I do in prep is I don't always reduce the volume down completely. I'll usually reduce it a little bit if I have to. One of the downfalls there is obviously caloric expenditures going down because you're doing less volume. Though you're going to make it up through your calorie deficit and cardio and nutrition, but I definitely will reduce the amount of sets to failure or heavy sets per se. What I could do is if you want to look at that 1/3 number, I would maybe take the heavy compound work and reduce it to 1/3 of the amount, but still leaving in, maybe 1 movement or 2 movements per muscle group per workout, in that trying to maintain a certain strength set point. Maybe I have a marker that I want them to or that I want a client to maintain, or that myself to maintain in a workout. I might do that and then add that filler work that's just basically volume that they're expending calories, but it's submaximal. It's not, it's not really hurting their CNS. So something like, for example, my last prep, I did this a lot. I didn't really want to reduce my volume from like I said, the calorie expenditure standpoint. So in my leg workout, for example, I had a squat and I had a certain rep scheme, a certain set scheme, and I would try to stick to it and get as best I could on the strength and stay as close as I could to my best mark through, towards the ending phases of prep. And I filled the rest in with basically just volume work, 7 to 8 RPE, and just filled it in, kept burning calories, kept moving type of thing. I know I don't really like to use training as a calorie burning tool, but in some cases, cutting the volume to 1/3 is going to be a huge hit on total caloric expenditure. Though training is not really as calorie burning per se as doing just straight cardio as far as like per time, per minute. But again, you could still drop off a lot of calories that you were otherwise burning. Now, in an off-season situation, yeah, I mean, I would use that as a taper. Those types of tapers, absolutely. People aren't going to lose muscle tissue that way. The only time that I wouldn't use it, because this literature in particular and what they're referring to is saying that they're maintaining exactly the same tension and intensity. So the only time I might not use that, I might pull the intensity back a little bit, at least briefly, depending on the person, depending on what they need. I might pull the intensity back, at least for the very beginning of the deload, and then replace and put the intensity back up if we need to continue the deload. Let's say they do the first week of a deload, they need a second week, I might bring the intensity back up a little bit. But yeah, I do like this premise. I think that it was effective. I think that it's a good way to go about deloading. I've also done the opposite. I've also had people deload with normal volume and just less intensity, and that works well also. I found that the nervous system tends to require really good with a lot of dynamic work, and not just, obviously not max effort work. So, but continuing to work, but doing it dynamically, dynamic work, so submaximal. But anyhow, yeah, I think it's a great way to add to those tapers, and I think it can definitely be used in prep. Like I said, I kind of mentioned how I would use it, and where I might not reduce volume too. So there's an instance for both. Kind of depends on the situation and what the actual body composition goals are. That was a little bit of a ramble, but I think I covered it. How to use metformin during prep. It's not really different than any other time. It is just going to be used to help with insulin sensitivity. It helps slow down glucose output from the liver. It mainly works on that front, not so much acutely lowering blood sugar like other glucose disposal agents do, or like insulin does. So it could really be used in the background at any point. It's not really a big difference between using it in off season and using it in a prep phase. Nothing inherently different. Structuring your training, more specifically, when is it time to change out some exercises for new variations, or when is it time to deload? Determining which of these two routes is needed. For example, if strength progressions have stalled on something, determining if you should look at swapping the exercises for something new to hopefully continue progression, or if you just need to deload and then work your weights back up to where they were before the deload and hopefully end up breaking the past previous best. It's a great question. That is a really good question, actually. In a lot of cases, it really comes back down to how you feel. Just because you stall on an exercise or stall on a phase and you're not making strength progression doesn't mean you need to deload necessarily. If you feel good, if you still have energy, or you're none of the major signs of overreaching or overtraining are present, or CNS is beat up, then just swap exercises. I think it's going to come into play more and more for an advanced trainee, simply because you're not going to be able to progress on exercises forever. One of the ways that we can do it is revisit exercises every so often, and then we have a new set point for progression. So if I progress on a squat for a little bit and I stop, I'll go and do something else and try to progress on that and do something else. And I find that I have to do that more so with advanced with advanced clients or with people that are seasoned, been training a long time, just because they aren't going to have progress. They aren't going to progress as long in some phases. I mean, some people do, but just in general, that's what I find. Now, if progression is stalled in strength and you feel like ass and you feel like you're overtrained, your nervous system's beat up, you're dragging, can't get going during the sessions, maybe you have some sleep disruptions, maybe you have any other, whatever, any other signs of nervous system being beat down, then you need to deload and you need to restart progressions like you talked about. But in general, I think that people might deload too often, to be honest. I'm not against deloading at all. I think that there's a lot of different ways to deload. Like I mentioned above, I deload people all kinds of different ways, and some are more aggressive deloads than others. But in general, I think that some people may just deload too often because they're like, oh, my strength's stalled, I need to deload. Not really. You probably just need to do something different. Not necessarily less. All right. So that was Instagram. Let me jump back over to Facebook. And see what we have rocking here. Okay. Ways to reduce stress. Okay. So this is an interesting one. I think one of the biggest issues with this is looking at reducing stress after it's already there. Looking at reducing stress when it's already present, when it's beating you up, rather than stopping it in the first place. I think one of the best ways to reduce stress, honestly, is to prevent it. Is be preventative. And that's, when I say that, it's not like, shit happens, life happens. You can't prevent. If you're super busy or whatever and stuff that you got to do it. But it's perceived. It's the way you perceive things. It's one of the biggest things I talk about with people all the time, people that are chronically stressed, is those automatic negative thoughts. And we're all guilty of it. I just think that that's how we're programmed. It's something I learned in psychology, and it was probably one of the best pieces of advice, best topics that I found, best methods that I found to reduce stress is when, easy example, something happens, something bad happens, you tend to react quickly. First reaction naturally is to think of the negatives, stress out, whatever. Instead, if we could stop for 5 to 10 seconds, normally logic kicks in. We can evaluate a situation. We can realize that it's not worth stressing about, or we can attack it, productively, not stress, and so on. So just not getting stressed about stuff that you don't need to get stressed about. That's the biggest thing. And that's, like I said, that's oversimplifying it big time, but that's really the main thing. Because there's tons of different recovery modalities and different stress reduction methods that you can use. Anything that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So meditation, soft belly breathing, just taking naps, whatever, sleep, just relaxing. But the thing is, there's a lot of people that are chronically stressed that are just so busy that they have limited time to do those things. So really what they need to do is stop the stress in the first place, because in reality, their life is going to be busy as hell. There's no way around it. I've come to that conclusion. My solution to my stress is not to meditate more. The solution to my stress is to do those things a little bit and use the soft belly breathing and stuff when I can. But the solution is really to just not get stressed about stuff. So evaluate things with logic, not emotion. Try not to get stressed when you don't need to. And you'll find that you're not, all those little things add up to tremendous stress reduction at the end of the day. So I think that's probably my piece of advice there from someone with lots of stress experience. So Okay. How to prevent fatigue and overall tiredness in relation to training as you get older? Well, I mean, there's some factors to consider there. I mean, you really need to make sure that the hormone environment and just overall general health environment is good. I mean, obviously, there's things that downregulate as you get older. Hormones drop, metabolism drops, thyroid drops, all kinds of stuff. So, making sure that you're not deficient in any nutrients, making sure that your hormone profile is good. For a male, maybe that's fixing low testosterone with testosterone replacement therapy. Maybe there's growth hormone deficiency. Maybe there's hypothyroidism. Um, for a female, menopause, maybe it's a deficiency in basically all sex hormones: progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. Um, there's a lot of things that could be going on, but just if you're noticing those things just in relation to aging, getting your blood work done, getting the labs done, checking all those sex hormones, checking your thyroid, checking all your health markers, being as thorough as possible, maybe even checking certain vitamins and nutrients in the diet, vitamins and minerals, and then see how you feel. Yeah, you might not feel like you're 20 again or whatever, but a lot of people, have those things going on that they're fighting against, and they're trying to work around it, and when really they're not addressing the main problem, like I said. So that's probably the best way to prevent fatigue and overall tiredness in relation to training is do those things. And then obviously, try to be smart with your training for longevity's sake, preventing injuries, not overtraining, realizing that your recoverability is going to be different regardless of if your hormone environment's the same. I notice that now. I'm not old at all. I'll be 28 years old this year, which is super young compared to a lot of people that train. I mean, there's people that have been training damn near as long as I've been alive. So probably some have been training longer. But what I can say is that I'm about, I would say I'm probably about 12 to 14 years into training, probably 12 to 13 years into training very seriously. And my nervous system recovery ability is totally different than it was when I was 18, way different. So I'm sure it'll be different again when I'm 35 and when I'm 40 and 45. So realizing that, and obviously adapting your training system to that. Okay. Using HMB during a deficit. How, when doses, is it worth it? Maybe slightly touch on using it in a time of a surplus. Okay, so HMB, it is a leucine metabolite. Dosages are normally in the 1 to 3 gram range, give or take. There's some products out there that have it in it, not a lot, but there are some. There are different forms of HMB2. There's a calcium form. That's what you see a lot of. HMB is typically used for just anti-catabolism. That's really what it's used for. There are, like I said, there are different forms. I would prefer people to try to use the free form rather than the calcium form, but it depends on what you can find. Let's see what else really with HMB. It's extremely potent. It is extremely potent as far as an anti-catabolic. It's a good thing to use in prep, like I said, or in a deficit in general. You could potentially use it for pre-cardio. One of the things, if I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this, I would have to go back and look because I haven't looked into it in a while, but I used to, and I do sometimes suggest this pre-cardio just because it doesn't affect insulin levels. So if you're doing something like using Yohimbine and HCl or things that require a baseline insulin environment or a baseline glucose environment, that you can use HMB with it as an anti-catabolic. Beyond that, I mean, one of the downsides obviously is the price. It is expensive. There's not a ton of different brands out there, so it just gets really pricey to use. And I think that's probably the biggest issue for a lot of people when they're already in deficit using all of, fat loss supplements. They've got all kinds of different things in play, and they're spending lots of money. Maybe they're competing, so they got all that, spending that money as well. Is it worth it? Potentially, if you have the budget, or if you're really pushing hard. I do think it does have its place. If pre-workout or pre-cardio potentially, but again, kind of depends on the budget. But that's a little bit on HMB. It is like I said, it is a really good supplement. Actually, it's underutilized if you ask me. Like I said, I do use it with some clients at times if I know that their budget will allow it, and it's really going to serve a good purpose. Don't really use it much in the off season, to be honest. I would rather people just use a sufficient dose of leucine in the off season, stimulate protein synthesis. I'm not really worried about the insulin being effective. They're probably not doing any kind of special cardio techniques that require that baseline. So that's kind of my take on the off season. Let me see. I think that might be the last question. Oh, okay. Bonus. Leg workout for hypertrophy with shitty knees. Okay, so I mean, probably the easiest answer there is pre-exhausting things. But one of the downsides is obviously you sacrifice load a lot of the time, and if you want hypertrophy, load is definitely a component to that. So that would be the downside. But I mean, like I said, pre-exhausting is great. Or just activation. I don't like to think of it as pre-exhausting, because when I do activation work, if it's hamstrings, like if I'm doing my hams, my adductors, my glutes, stuff like that, I don't want them to be exhausted. I want them to be activated. So right now, before I squat, I have been doing adductors, hamstrings, and just a little bit of quads. Not a lot, but I mean, at that point, everything's just fires. And then with squatting too, any kind of squatting motion, whether it's hack squat or barbell squat or Smith machine squat or whatever, or a V squat, one of the hammer strength machines or similar machines, I find that if you do have really bad knees, I don't really like high bar squatting or like mainly quad focused squatting, unless you are very good at that neural connection, or your legs are already blown up and you can't feel anything but the muscle. Otherwise, if you're going into barbell squat earlier in the workout, you might try a low bar squat. Or if you're going into like a hammer or a hack squat, having your feet up a little bit higher on the platform and letting hams and glutes kick in as well as quads, and not making it entirely quad focused. If you want to do quad focused work, stick to a leg press or something else that you can isolate them a little bit better. I do find that unless you're super good at the neural connection part of it, that it is going to be harder on your knees to high bar squat and put super heavy quad focused movements, unless your legs are really already trashed and that's all you can feel is your quads, or you have the mind muscle connection. So those are a couple things. So a little more hamstring focus in there, a little hamstring glute focus, and it's going to take a little bit off the knee, and then you can refocus on the quads and your ISO movements. And that is it for today. We're at about 25 minutes. I appreciate the questions, guys. Sorry about the camera thing. I'm working on the camera a little bit. I know it's focusing in and out a little bit. I'm tweaking a couple things. Got a new camera. I record some of these from my phone too. I got a brand new phone, so I'm working on figuring all this crap out as well. The cameras on this thing is amazing, but I can't figure shit out. I suck at this, so I will get this. I'll get this out. It'll be on YouTube, all that good stuff, and I will talk to you guys next week.